Hello, everyone. I'm Alita Stam, reporter at PR Week. I hope you've been enjoying PR Week Connect thus far. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this session, Femme Forward. In the past year, women have been disproportionately affected by the coronavirus pandemic, shouldering more of the childcare and homeschooling, and losing more jobs than their male counterparts. These effects were felt even more acutely by women of color. And of those who have maintained their jobs, the challenges have only intensified. The comms industry, whose workforce is about 70% female, feels this acutely. Starting in late February, PR Week US debuted a series of columns written with firsthand perspectives of women in PR and related fields, sharing their stories of how they have been facing the professional and personal challenges of surviving in the pandemic. This panel features 4 women who have either already penned or will pen a column for this series, which shares the same name as this session, Femme Forward. I could not be more pleased to introduce this terrific quartet who will shine a light on the struggles women communicators have been facing over the past year plus and what can be done to remedy these issues in the future. Joining me today is Iskra Lawrence, mother, model, and self-care advocate, Angel Renee, VP of Sales and Marketing at NetBlaze, Helen Shelton, Global Chief Diversity Officer at Partners, and Jordana Strasberg, Director of Executive Comms at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us, for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we do get started, I also wanted to let our audience know that if you think of any questions during the session, you can ask them in the chat and we will get them answered if we have time at the end. I know our audience wants to hear from these brilliant and inspirational women, so let's get right to it. My first question is for Iskra. As a body positivity and self-care advocate, how can women advocate for themselves, especially when they worry their voice doesn't matter or are just nervous about asking questions?
Yeah, thank you for the first question. I think that one thing we are led to believe is that if you cannot see, you cannot be. And that is just not the case. Everyone who creates a movement or who creates change didn't see themselves either represented or voiced. And in that sense, we have to figure out how we can gain the courage if we want to be the first to go and do that and not let anyone else's opinions or anyone else being gatekeepers to stop us from doing that. So for me, this might seem unrelatable. My strife was during the fashion industry, where being a curvier model, I was constantly told that my body size was too large to fit into sample size. If I'd have believed that all of these people, the agents, the stylists, everyone in the industry had told me that it wasn't possible, I would not be here today, and I wouldn't have been able to change that narrative. And now I can look at agencies' boards and see a plethora of different sized bodies. So it's very, very important that even if you are told, or even if you believe that your voice does not matter, or you don't see yourself represented, you have to be that representation and that voice, because you do matter, and just you can be that change. You are enough.
Yeah, it's all about advocating for yourself, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Angel, as a mother of 3 and VP of Sales and Marketing, speaking of advocating for yourselves, what did the pandemic teach you about finding the happy place between being a caregiver and a professional?
I think the biggest challenge during that time was finding that balance. It was either balance or burnout, right?
Mhm.
And so, right, everyone's like, yeah, it was either the balance or the burnout. So I really, after 3 weeks in, was on the verge of burnout. And so what I realized is I had to have the patience to put a plan together in order for everything to kind of work seamlessly for us, in order to give myself to my job 100% and also give myself to my children 100%. And in the article that I penned, what I said was I ended up doing a lot of my work before my children woke up, and when they went to bed, I was able to do that being home and be completely present with them, which is something, some time that I'll never get back. So it's kind of the blessing in disguise of this pandemic that I was able to find that balance and then focus on, gratitude for where I was at that moment. And so I think that's the biggest thing I learned. It was the balance or burnout. And I think it's critical for all working moms, not even necessarily during the pandemic, but at any time.
Yeah, and that's tough too. That's a lot of extra time, where you're working in the morning or at night. That makes for some pretty long days.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, but during this time where we were locked at home, if you didn't do that, you'd end up working 7 days a week, 24/7 without any separation, because it stopped the separation between work hours and, I say, parenting hours or mom hours. So finding that balance was just truly, truly critical now
Right.
more than ever.
Mhm. And part of, finding that was being able to communicate with your family, but also with your bosses, your fellow employees, to make sure that your voices are being heard. Helen, how did you ensure that women's voices are being heard, particularly women of color?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I really um, respect and believe everything that's been said so far from Angel and Iskra. It really starts with you. It starts from within. You know, to be heard, you have to first start with your own voice, and I think that that's very critical, particularly in the workforce. And we have to be our own advocates. And when you become your own advocate, you also have to ensure that you have the ability to deliver on what you're advocating about yourself. I don't think that there are any necessarily different rules for women of color versus other women. I think that in our industry, very often as women, we put our clients, our colleagues and things first, you know but the reality is it has to start from within. You have to be your own best advocate and advocate for yourself. And I think that there are so many more resources now, and I believe that the what I refer to as the dual pandemic of the obvious health issue that's going on around the world, as well as the social unrest and the fight for equal justice, the spotlight that we have on it, it gives us an incredible opportunity, if you will, to make a difference and to um, be advocates for ourselves. And there are so many resources that exist right now. As an example, I'm on the board of New York Women in Communications, and this is probably the most diverse board that the organization has had in its 90 years. And we just launched a Women Heard initiative, and it is designed to help women advocate for themselves and to give them a platform for which to speak about the issues and things that are facing them in the workplace.
Yeah, I know resources is something that's sometimes it's hard to find somewhere to turn, when you feel like you need something. And so to have the more you have available for you, the easier it becomes, certainly.
Absolutely.
So, Jordana, how did your relationship with stress and mental health change as you adjusted to life during the pandemic?
Admittedly, it was a really, and it still is a really challenging time mentally. I actually live in Canada. My partner lives in the US. So when the borders closed down, not only was I locked down at home with my son, which I love, but my partner we live about 30 minutes apart, but it ended up feeling like an ocean apart. So that added some additional stress to it. So for me, it was really interesting. Professionally, it was a very, very strong 2020. But personally, I was struggling a lot mentally. And I decided to figure out how to cope. And what I wrote about and what worked for me was I started a gratitude journal. So I got the 5-minute journal because I wasn't into journaling, 5-minute journal, and started doing 5-minute meditation every day. And I've been doing that religiously for over 120 days now. I took up a hobby that I loved as a child, but didn't do as an adult, and started horseback riding with my son. So we were getting outside every weekend. I couldn't use my phone at all, of course. And then also, I'm like somebody who believes in the signs, but I followed the signs. And I heard a podcast with Tim Ryan, the CEO of PwC, speaking on it. Coincidentally, saw a job posting and ended up switching careers after spending 15 years at an automotive company. So I did a lot to try to boost my mental state, and I would say it's worked well, and it's been exciting and good. That part was a good for me part of the pandemic. I kind of went from the darkest days to some of the best.
Yeah, isn't it crazy how sometimes it can happen like that, where, the greatest change happens when you're under so much pressure?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure all of us have seen that in our lives, and our stories are probably come from some of our darkest days. When you're in it, it sucks. It just does. But as you come out of it and you can reflect on it and share that with others, I think it's a really good thing.
Right. And one of the things that you also talk about in your a column that you wrote for us was about taking risks. And I really liked that idea of, even if you're scared, jumping into it, which I feel like as women, professionals, moms, wives, daughters, it can be kind of scary sometimes to make those jumps, when you're like, well, I'm safe here, I'm good here, I got a good thing going. So what would you say to the women that are maybe a little bit hesitant to take those risks, to make that jump?
Earlier in my career, I led communications, executive communications for Mary Barra, the CEO of GM. And she always gave people advice, and I stand by it. And I think it goes to exactly what you're saying. Like, if you feel a little bit uncomfortable about it, then you should do it. Like, that's when you know that it's going to stretch you a little bit. As I thought about writing that column, I was trying to figure out like how I got through the pandemic, and I saw the commonality between the things. Like, I think it was risky to start writing in a journal. Like, you have to be vulnerable. It was risky to start horseback riding. I have a metal rod in my back and I'm a grown adult starting from scratch. And then it was risky to take on a career change. But as I started to think about it, that was like the common thread. And all of those things have made me a stronger person in the last number of months. I mean, I still have a long way to go and struggle many days with the challenges of it, but that I think feel uncomfortable and jump in, and it gets more comfortable, and then you got to move on to the next thing.
Right. Yeah, it's a journey. So you guys are all accomplished women in your own right. You've been doing some amazing things, both personally and in your careers. So how do you view your roles as mentors, both to other women, but as leaders as a whole?
I'll jump in on this one because my story is bizarre in the sense that I thought I was getting into the modeling industry, and in turn, when I started to speak on things that I felt needed to change and to progress, size inclusivity and photoshopping, the dangers of it, I ended up coincidentally growing, a large platform of over 6 million people now, and I essentially got coined a role model, and that's something I never intended. It felt wonderful, it felt honorable, but it also came with a lot of pressure, and having many young women follow me. I've done many meet and greets, and I've had girls as young as 7 come up to me and tell me that they don't like themselves, or they don't feel beautiful, and having to give them advice, thinking, well, I also didn't have that self-confidence, and I did go through an eating disorder and body dysmorphia when I was a teenager, and I'm still trying to figure that stuff out. So I think being a mentor and a role model is something that you obviously feel honored to do, but you have to, again, a bit like Angel said about separating that personal from professional, in the sense of, I do feel for a while I was holding myself to kind of unattainable standard of just being the perfect role model, and feeling like I very much had to be very cookie cutter, and it meant that I made decisions based on what I felt other people would feel about me. And you can't go through life like that. So I think one of the main things when you are being a mentor is remember to be imperfect, and remember to continue to tell people that that is the best thing you can be, is just showing up imperfectly as you are, being accountable, knowing that you will probably fail and make a bunch of mistakes. But if you are open about that and authentic about that, then that is the best kind of mentor that you can be to anyone.
Can I go ahead and jump in as well? First, I want to say, Iskra, my daughters were so excited that you're on this panel, and I had no idea that they knew who you were or anything. So I have made your mom cool points today. So I'm excited about that. And in agreement with what you said. So I had always been trying to mentor. I'm like, I should mentor this certain type of person. And then I realized, what is my story and where did I come from? And I am a single, divorced, working mom, corporate mom. And now those are the people that I mentor. So once I came back to my core and could share my story, that's who's attracted to me. And that's who I can mentor well, because it's my truth. And so I had to kind of go back and say, okay, it's not about what I'm doing, specifically my job title, but it's more about who I am combined with that. And so those are the types of women that I look to help now, the working moms, the ones that are struggling with balancing it all. And then it really comes full circle for me then. And I feel empowered to do so.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jordana.
No, go ahead, Helen, you first.
Okay. Well, no, I was just, again, going to agree with everything that's been said. But for me, I guess when I started out in business late 80s, early 90s, the word mentorship didn't necessarily, I don't have any recollection of that. And in hindsight, I realized that I had, several very powerful mentors who I didn't know about that word or the concept of it. But over time, you kind of, this concept has jumped out at me, and I've made it a personal and professional mission to ensure that I play a role in the lives of women, in particular, women of color, in the advocacy work that I do as a volunteer in the industry and also in the workplace. I feel like mentorship is one of the most natural things that we as professionals and as women can do for each other to help people create opportunities for themselves, to give them advice, to be honest and candid with them, and really to be a support. I think that that's truly, truly essential. And it's the only way that we can see that a difference is made and that we can continue to smash that glass ceiling that everybody talks about. We can only do it collectively and together. We cannot do it, as disparate sort of units and everybody's kind of just out for themselves. I mean, obviously you've got to be bold and, in your career and chase after your goals and reach those goals. But it's also imperative on all of us to reach back and help other women succeed.
I agree with that, Helen. And I was thinking too, Angel, about what you were saying. I'm also a single divorced mom. So, I do naturally tend to talk about that a little bit. But as I think about kind of advancing in my career, I've also started to be, and it kind of started with just my friends, like talking a little bit more openly about our salaries, talking a little bit more openly about how you negotiate compensation. And as I became more comfortable discussing that with my close peer set, I think I've broadened it a little bit, and I'm very comfortable now talking with the next generation or the peer set that I'm not as close with about those things, because I feel like that as we're trying to build equality, especially in pay, it's been a bit of a mystery, frankly, for my career, and you never really knew what anyone else was getting or not getting. And I think I've been very happy to help others negotiate, help others understand the importance of knowing what you're worth. So that's just, I think, a different take on it. And it doesn't always seem like it's actually, formal mentoring. We're not sitting down regularly, but I think supporting each other and being open about the possibilities and giving others confidence to ask for what they're worth is important.
Yeah. Can I also jump on what Helen said? Because I really just loved what you said about the fact that mentorship is such a natural thing. And I think we just do ourselves a disservice. And it was something that I felt I did do early on in my career. Kind of, I've got the secret sauce of knowing how to build this career and take off. Let me just hold it close and not share this wisdom or those experiences. And that is always doing us as a community, especially as women, such a disservice. And also the fact that as a mentor, it feels like this kind of something you have to strive for and have so much experience and life experience and maturity to be. But mentorship is something that we are doing with our friends on a daily basis, within our community, within our household even. And so I think that mentorship is not just something that's natural, just like you said, Helen, I couldn't agree more. It feels like the most rewarding thing you can do, helping someone else and uplift them. But I also think it's just necessary as well. And I think that we do a disservice when we aren't supporting someone else. I've definitely, when I felt insular, been sat in my own ego. And that is not a good place to be. So the more that you give and you give that time and you give that energy and support, it will uplift you and it will help your own growth as well. And you don't have to have, the best job or the most amount of followers online or anything like that. Those small words of affirmation that you can give to someone else, or again, like you said, Georgiana, sharing your income or sharing kind of a failure that you might have had, that you don't know what that will spark in someone else, and could literally be just the support that they needed in that moment to take that next risk or that next step.
I also wanted to go back and touch on something that Helen mentioned about not being our own isolated groups. you know, this idea of intersectionality and intersectional feminism, if we want to use that word, or, you know, support for other women, you know, how do we provide equal opportunities to women who are part of minority groups, whether that's race, culture, the LGBTQ identity, or disability?
Well, I think it's essential that women, particularly women of color, know that there are resources out there, and that it's okay to be candid and honest about what the issues are. You know, it's a very tough environment that we're in, and then to combine everything else we're going through, you know, it's really a challenge. And I think that if I even just look at my own career trajectory, I was fortunate enough to have, you know, very successful women in my life from a professional and a personal standpoint. But I think it has to start from within, and you have to sort of get over the fear of failure, the fear of being honest. And for me, as a woman of color, if it was not for obviously, you know, sort of my family upbringing and what my parents taught me and my family taught me, but more importantly, going out there and getting involved with organizations that uplift women of color. So you know, I happen to be a member of an organization called the Links Incorporated. I'm in a African American women's sorority. These are things that have helped me, even under very extraordinary, tough circumstances. I mean, if you have those kinds of resources and you have that sort of inner belief in yourself, a lot of the challenges that you go through can be met, and you understand that you're not in it alone. And I love what Jordana was saying about, you know, being honest about the pay. You know, I have one of my dearest friends. We were in college together, and we've been friends for many, many years. And she said to me one day, she was like, Helen, you know, it's more than just doing the work and doing a great job. You have to speak up for yourself. You have got to advocate for things like your salary. And, you know, if they put the offer before you, you don't have to take the first offer. I mean, obviously, I didn't necessarily need her to say that, but it was validating to know that it's okay to feel like, you know what, I am doing a hell of a good job. You know, pay me, you know, what's the scale and what I'm worth and more. And so that's the other thing I would just say is be fearless. And everything that I've ever gotten in my career is obviously I deserved it, but also I asked for it. People are not going to be sitting around and going, oh, well, you know what? You're a woman of color, and women of color are sort of the flavor of the moment right now, or we're going to go ahead and promote you. We're going to go ahead and give you the salary. We as women, we have to ask for and go after what we want and prove it every single day. It's not easy. And that's where we need the support, because it is not easy. And a lot of times in Iskra, I happen to be a fan of yours as well, as Angel said. And, you know, what I like about what you do is you're very honest, and you make it look effortless, but you let the people know, honey, it's not easy. And I feel like that willingness to be open and honest and to be a little vulnerable, it makes it more realistic. And especially as we try to be role models for younger women coming behind us and things, it's essential that we do that.
I'm honored, Helen. Thank you. And I definitely agree. And as a white woman being in rooms where I've literally, it's been blatantly obvious to me that there is no women of color, there is no diversity. Those are the moments where you have to speak up. There's been multiple photo shoots I've been on. There has been multiple panels that have been speaking about diversity. And I've said, okay, let me see who else is on the panel. It looks like just a bunch of my twins. Like that's not diverse. You cannot be speaking to diversity. So there is definitely so much work for us as white women to do when we are in those rooms. And when we do have those opportunities, we have to speak up if we see it. And it's our duty. So I think that's something I hope to definitely encourage more people to do. And the fact that for many people it feels uncomfortable, we need to get to the point where it's not, because it just isn't. We're advocating for not just ourselves, but for everyone. And I'm really, really honored to be on this panel, because I think that I'm learning so much right now. So thank you very much, Helen and Angel and Jordana. I recently, Jordana, you'll be very proud of me, shared my investment portfolio, and I shared figures. And one thing is I'm quite new to investing. I've been doing it maybe 3 years. This year, I really took it a lot more seriously. I had more time in my hands. I did more research. My husband actually got into crypto, and we've been kind of dabbling in that space. And I just thought, if I don't share the amounts that I'm investing, I feel like it isn't going to be relatable enough for women to actually take that first step. So I was telling women, I started off and I was trying $10 here, and I was just being so cautious, and I'm very risk adverse when it comes to money. I'm like a saver, and I would have money just sat in my account, absolutely doing nothing with the interest rate right now. And sharing those stories and letting women know, because if there's one thing that I just hope for our future, it's that we can all become financially independent, because that type of freedom will allow us to no longer be part of financial abuse, no longer be stuck in those places that can cause us harm long term. And we don't need someone else to create generational wealth. We will be doing that as women. So much work to be done, but like you said, just that authentic, honest rawness, and hey, I messed up, or these are the amounts, and let's talk about how much money that we deserve, just like you said, Helen, because I can count on my hands the amount of times I've talked about money with my girlfriends. I can assure you, men are talking about it every single day.
I want to chime in too, because this is such a great conversation, and just what everybody has said. And what I got from this is that transparency is so important. Transparency, no competition, and building community. And that's where I'm at. So you guys, I'm going to go and find more people to mentor, because that's what I'm getting from this. Like, we need to help more and educate more and share more and be completely like transparent, because that's how everyone learns. So thank you.
I just read this quote, and I've had heard it before, but it talks about bloom where you're planted, basically. And I'm sure everybody has heard that, but it struck me because, part of what I do in my job is I actually edit and oversee our newsletter, and I work with Peter on his president's letter every month. And we were talking about what the theme of the May newsletter should be. And we talked about that, the idea that, maybe the circumstances aren't necessarily ideal right now in terms of the economy, in terms of, what the prospects look like, but there are opportunities for us all to make a difference where we are. And that's really one of the founding principles that we have at Finn, which is make a difference in the world and to use our resources where we are, not just to deliver, obviously, for the clients, but also to do work that's impactful and that will make a difference. And I believe that mentorship and building inclusive cultures and the fact that, as you just said, listen, I'm very aware of the fact that sometimes there are no women of color in the room. And the fact that you are willing to be honest about that and want to do something about it is very insightful and very encouraging, frankly. It's horrible when people just kind of have this limited view that the whole world has to revolve around them, and that other people's opinions or diversity of opinion or diversity in terms of ethnicity and other things don't matter because you're just so focused on you. And we can't succeed as a culture and as a society if we don't see things more from a diverse perspective.
I just want to ask a question for the sake of transparency, the theme that we're talking about here. What are some of the biggest obstacles that women must overcome to truly feel equal and empowered in the workplace, but also in their lives? Where's like, place one, we have to fight, place two, place three,
An area that I think I try to live by this, and I try to encourage others as well, is to not make assumptions. Like, I don't want people to make assumptions about me and my capabilities. So when I was getting divorced and had a baby, I felt like I had to overcompensate too much and explain how much time I had to work and all of those things. I really would like to wipe that clean. So I try to remind others when we're in HR settings, like, we should not be making assumptions about what people are capable of based on what we know about their personal life. So so that's one piece. And then I think, kind of bouncing off of that, I also applaud the men on my team who are leaving work to go pick up their kids from school or call in and say they can't come in because their child is sick. And I think we need to do more of that in the workplace, so that there's a little bit more of a balance from a gender standpoint of the playing field.
I'm gonna jump in there too. I'm so sorry, but the same thing, I think, with that balance. I once had someone tell me that I don't think you can do this job with children. That there's too many hours in the week. And I'm like, have you ever seen a mom multitask? Have you ever? Like, that's who I want on my team, And so he's no longer here and I'm here because of that, and because I can multitask. And so those are the things that I think working moms, women bring to the table, that ability to multitask. And the one thing that I have learned is to speak up. And I think, Helen, you said that you have to ask for what you want. And when women come into any role that we're in, for some reason, I've noticed that men will speak up and voice their opinions, and it's not deemed as aggressive. If we speak up, we are too forward and too aggressive, and some other words that we've gotten called for speaking our mind. And it's not doing it in a rude way. It's just speaking your truth and speaking to the point. So I think that's something that I instill even in my daughters at this young age, to truly, if there's something that you see that's not right, speak up. If there's something that you want, speak up, and it's okay.
I love that so much. I was going to kind of say there's this fantastic book by Eve Rodsky. I've been doing a partnership with Activia, and they also work with her. And I've learned so much from this book. It's called Fair Play. And it essentially allows you 100 cards that you deal out to you and your partner. And they allow you to focus on different points of your life by essentially sharing those kind of household obligations. Because in society, the expectation is that women take on all the household duties. And that is why there is this kind of misconception that, oh, if you're a mom and you're a woman, you're not going to have time to kind of really take your career seriously, because the assumption is that you're doing all the household stuff, which often it does fall on women. And that is definitely a narrative that as my child grows up, I'm going to make sure he knows that there is no gender specific roles, that is very much, we have to be equal no matter who we are or who we choose to be, and figuring out how we can always support. So I know that my partner, I'm so grateful for him. We have our check-ins. And I feel like that helps us keep on track, because he'll ask me, how are you feeling? Are you feeling like you can be productive? Are you feeling like you have enough time and energy to invest in your career? What have you done this week towards your goals of? And those types of conversations we need to be having with our partners and our girlfriends and our community and in the workplace, because those check-ins are so needed. And you can get lost and you can get overwhelmed. And we have to know that it can be tough, but just like you said, if there's anyone that can multitask, it's women, and we have got this, but we do need that support sometimes.
We've seen a lot of change during the pandemic, where you've had to reach out to people, whether they're, employee or employers, friends, family, even if you couldn't be with them physically, you got to spend more time with your family, even if, balancing that was a little bit hard between work. Can you guys each give a future prediction or a wish for gender equity in the industry in a post-COVID world? Do you think that things will go back to, women having, a slightly higher employment than they do now, or, a balancing work of being able to stay home a little bit more, work from home, that sort of thing?
I want to predict, and I hope what I'm hoping for is that everyday flexibility becomes the norm. So, because that's what I love right now. So I like, if I need to jet out and grab my son from school, or I want to duck out early and go tobogganing with him, because it's like I want to have that everyday flexibility continue. So I'm predicting that. I'm manifesting it. I hope it happens.
And I want to predict that the conversation around this issue is driving action, that we will see we are seeing tangible action, and we are seeing change take place. And the fact that we live in a very now sort of moment, and everything is happening in terms of this sort of dual pandemic. Again, the spotlight is on us. It's on all of us. And it's on those who are in a particular position to make a difference. People are going to ask tough questions if you're not doing your share. So I do predict that all of these wonderful conversations and, partners and collaborators and thinkers and influencers will be able to drive the conversation into action, into tangible results that will benefit everyone, but first and foremost, women.
I think for me, I just want to make sure, I love what you said, Helen, that these conversations are the catalyst to the change, right? And, my fear, which I don't want to talk about my fear, but I don't want these conversations to stop. They're crucial to changing the workforce for women. And so if and when this world opens back up, to a more normal phase, we have to keep these conversations going and not go back to the status quo.
Yeah, I really appreciate the idea of the conversations becoming actionable. And I think we're in an interesting place in society because of the growth and the impact. And this year, COVID has forced so many of us to live online a lot more, that I feel like there has been a pendulum shift of accountability. I feel like right now it's kind of really going to the far end of cancel culture. And I'm watching many people being cancelled, and I'm seeing the impact of that. And I'm seeing people that I don't believe cancel culture works, in the sense that I think it makes people withhold. And I think people then get scared to speak up, and to sometimes act on these types of conversations, because most of the time they can be uncomfortable situations, like we were talking about earlier. And those are the ones that usually are what we need to create change, right? So I predict that hopefully the pendulum will start kind of going back to more of the middle, and it being about accountability rather than cancel culture. And I hope that because we've spent more time with our families, that potentially they may value the household investments that we often make, and realize that they are crucial to our families, or our little communities surviving. And I think that we have to value so much all the things that women do that just aren't. I heard another quote, and it was about men's time being diamonds and women's being like sand. And we have to value our time, because it is something that we don't get back. And I remember my husband, one night we were sat there, and it was 8 p.m. and I was putting things away and tidying up. And it was when we were putting the Christmas wreath down, and he was sat on the sofa watching ESPN, looking at me and being like, why do you have to do that now? Why do you choose to do this stuff at 8 p.m.? I was like, because if I didn't do it now, because obviously, I was working in the day and looking after our newborn son, it would not get done. Like, do you realize that? And he didn't mean it in any type of way, but it just struck a nerve of just the absolute ignorance of just all the things. So when you press that button, yes, there's water in that. And when you think, yes, that's because I did that behind the scenes, that you don't see the time and investment women are often making. So I hope that maybe because we've been in this pandemic, maybe the people around us will value our time a little bit more. And also we have to value it too. We have to learn how to say no, and we have to learn how to say not right now. And we, again, just have to prioritize ourselves, like Jordana doing your gratitude. It takes 5 minutes, your meditation, then your gratitude, 10 minutes total. But that's really important for us, that self-advocation, that prioritizing of our time. And I hope that's what's going to be the future, that women really value themselves and know their worth and know their time, and will advocate for themselves and each other.
Well, I know that I certainly valued the time that I spent here with you guys. I learned a lot, and I certainly hope that our audience did too. I look forward to seeing that change in the future as we hold institutions, organizations, companies accountable for what we want to see changed in the future. So thank you all so much for joining me today for this session, and a major expression of gratitude to Iskra, Angel, Helen, and Jordana for taking time from their very busy schedules to join us. Thank you all, of course, for tuning in, and I welcome and encourage all of you in our audience to stay tuned, as PR Week Connect is not over. In a few minutes, we will be starting a session called Purposeful Future, which will feature young Gen Z comms leaders discussing one of the most important topics in the business world right now, and how our youth is truly changing the landscape. You won't want to miss it, so please do stick around. This is PR Week reporter Alita Stam, thanking you for attending this session. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.